Now, more stories, insights, and analysis of Illinois policy and politics. This is Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Policy Institute. Once again, your host, AM 560's Dan Proft.
Dan Proft back with John Tillman, President and CEO of the Illinois Policy Institute. John, I guess some good news this week. Looks like the Chicago Teachers Union begging off the idea of the second strike in 4 years. Some feedback from teachers, maybe from parents, that they don't want to do this at this time. Maybe perhaps not getting as much public support as they thought they would get this time as compared to a few years back. But that doesn't mean they don't have a lot of good ideas about funding.
No shortage.
Yeah, there is no shortage is right, as one person described it. Basically, what CTU has proposed in terms of additional revenue, in addition to what the state should do, graduating the state income tax and all those things, that if you buy gasoline, own commercial property, use a ride-sharing service like Uber or Lyft, stay in a hotel, or operate a business, that you should pay more than you're paying now. And that's one way to continue to fund a bankrupt and junk-rated Chicago public school system.
But when you say bankrupt, you actually don't mean financially, though that is true. What you mean bankrupt in terms of its ability to teach children, I assume.
I mean bankrupt in every sense of the word,
okay.
Morally, financially.
There we go.
Yes, ethically. So what to make of the recovery package, quote unquote, that the Chicago Teachers Union has offered?
It really, Dan,
for CPS.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It really illustrates the absolute war that the union leadership is waging on the citizens of Chicago. First of all, they undereducate their children or badly educate them and don't deliver on the core that they have monopoly of, especially for poor citizens in Chicago, poor children in Chicago. Secondly, they see the citizens of Chicago as tax targets, and their job is to go to work every day and then hand over more money to the failing system. And they have no compassion. They have no empathy for someone who's struggling to start and run a business, maybe hire a new worker, get a ride to go to a doctor's appointment in a Lyft or a Uber vehicle or whatever the case is. And they're just completely disconnected. The good news is the rank and file members apparently live those lives in the city and gave a little pushback to the union leadership.
Yeah, after seeming to indicate that they would support, but maybe they got a little weak need. Partly, too, some of what CTU, the teachers union, has done was of dubious legality. And for more on that, we're now happy to be joined by Jeff Schwab. He's a lawyer with the Liberty Justice Center, which is housed in the Illinois Policy Institute. Jeff, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
So, talk a little bit about the Chicago Teachers Union and this run-up to a decision not to strike, it appears. But over the last 5 months, they've engaged in a lot of kind of tactical maneuvers to prepare for a strike and to try and put the city and the state on the dime to provide more funding for the schools. And I wonder if they've run afoul of labor law at all during this process.
Well, it does appear that the one-day strike was illegal. The Illinois Educational Labor Relations Act does not provide for a strike or a one-day strike for an unfair labor practice, which was what the union claimed that it was. And the Illinois Educational Labor Relations Board found that there was evidence to show that the strike was illegal and allowed the Chicago Public Schools to move forward with getting an injunction from a circuit court. So that was illegal. I think the bigger picture is really interesting when you see now that the union is not seems like it's not going to strike, but has released this list of what they're calling a revenue recovery package, which is basically a huge amount of taxes that they want to impose on Chicago taxpayers.
Yeah, I mean, those taxes are shovel-ready, John.
Yes, I actually thought Jeff was going to go on with another point. Jeff, I have a question for you. When will they be arresting Karen Lewis? I mean, she violated the law. So is there a consequence, or is this just, niceties?
Well, there really isn't that many consequences. I mean, that's the thing. CPS is going to get an injunction, presumably, that will prevent the teachers union from doing an illegal strike in the future. But what good is that? Because they don't really plan to do one in the near future, and that wouldn't prevent a strike that on the negotiation of lack of a contract, which although they say they're not going to strike now. And the other things that CPS are looking for basically is their attorney's fees and then the cost that it costs taxpayers for the strike. Now, they may or may not get that. I don't know. But that's not a huge consequence if you're Karen Lewis and the teachers union.
It was, as an observer of Karen Lewis and the teachers union, what's your legal intuition about their strategic decision to not strike? Was it a watering down of support for Karen Lewis among teachers, or what's your instinct?
Yeah, I actually think that there may not be as much support from the rank and file teachers and I think they're getting pushback. If you look at the timeline, it's really interesting. The only time that the rank and file teachers have actually voted to strike was in December. But since December, we've had a CPS offer that Karen Lewis herself said was pretty good, but then the House of Delegates voted against that. You've had the House of Delegates vote to authorize a one-day strike, which the rank-and-file teachers never voted on. You have had a Educational Labor Relations Board find that strike may be illegal. You've had an independent fact finder find that the offer that CPS made was pretty good. And now you had a House of Delegates have a meeting on whether they were going to strike or not, and they just didn't hold a vote. Nowhere in that process since CPS's offer have the teachers had any say. So I think Karen Lewis is probably feeling a little pushback. In fact, in several news articles, I think Jesse Sharkey mentioned there was concern by teachers over losing their health insurance and also their end-of-year paycheck.
I think it's cute with this House of Delegates how the Chicago Teachers Union pretends to be a small d Democratic institution. I think it's funny.
I call it the Politburo.
Yeah, it's they're so cute. Jeff Schwab, he's an attorney for the Liberty Justice Center. Jeff, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.